Now. So very welcome to this second webinar of the training circle of conflict transformation. We're very happy to receive Nuno and Eva that will share with us the learnings of the Coming Down to Earth Summit. Muy bienvenidos a este segundo webinario del Círculo de Entrenamientos para la Transición. Estamos muy felices de recibir hoy día a Nuno y a Eva con los aprendizajes del Summit volviendo o bajando a la Tierra. So I give now the space for Eva that I'm looking for you, where you are. So there you are.
For me?
Yes, we're with you now. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, and it's really lovely to be here with everybody. So we spend quite a lot of time in the conflict summit trying to create spaces where people could have an experience, not just learn things. And so I'm going to take you through a little meditation around conflict that hopefully will kind of settle all of us and also possibly bring some insight, but also get us ready for the learning that Nuno is going to share. And I'm just putting on my timer because otherwise it could take a very long time.
So, entonces Eva nos comparte que en el Summit no solo se reflexionó acerca de este tema, sino que se compartieron prácticas para poder generar el espacio, para poder sostenerlo. Y en este instante lo que vamos a invitarles es a abrir ese espacio para poder sostener y abrazar las tensiones y los conflictos.
And of course, with everything else, how you do this or don't do it is completely up to you. So keep your eyes open or shut, keep your camera on or off, follow what I'm saying or go on your own journey. It'll take about 4 minutes or 5 minutes.
Entonces, puedes elegir hacerlo o no, está bien. Puedes dejar tus ojos abiertos o cerrarlos. Puedes dejar tu cámara on or off, abierta o cerrada, como tú lo desees. Va a durar alrededor de 4 minutos.
So, bringing your attention to your breath, just let yourself feel it coming in and going out without judging it in any way.
Entonces te invito a traer tu respiración, tu atención a la respiración, sin controlarla, simplemente déjala ir y venir.
And if it feels good, let your gaze soften and your eyelids close. Feel the weight of your body pulling into the earth, and notice if you want to be more comfortable, you can move or let go of some tension you hadn't noticed. Use your in-breath to help you find the tension and your out-breath to help you let it go.
Si se siente bien, bajar la mirada.
So let's be aware of breathing going in and out, and aware of the breathing of all these others scattered around the world, but together with us in our breathing.
Y puedes tomar conciencia de tu respiración entrando y saliendo, y a la vez tomar conciencia de todos estos seres en este círculo que nos reunimos hoy.
So if you now bring to mind a conflict that you've experienced recently, large or small, and hold it as close or as far to you as you wish. So you can have it very far and tiny in your awareness, or really close, you can dive in and see just what happened. But let the story of the conflict run through your mind.
Y te invitamos a recordar algún conflicto que haya ocurrido en el corto plazo y que elijas tenerlo como bien cerquita a ti o bien distante a ti, tan cuán cerca o lejos lo prefieras. Sin embargo, solo obsérvalo, da lo mismo donde esté en la distancia.
And see whether you can now let the story of what happened fall away and just stay with the emotions that happened for you in the conflict.
Y ve si es posible como eliminar el cuento y la historia que había asociado a ese conflicto y solo permanecer con las emociones que te generó, que te activó.
And if you can use your imagination, let these feelings become dark and heavy and hot. And imagine that you could breathe in this dark, heavy and hot essence of the emotions that arise in relation to the conflict.
Y si puedes usar tu imaginación, imagina que estos sentimientos se vuelven pesados, calientes y densos. Y ve si con tu inhalación puedes inhalar esos sentimientos pesados, fuertes y densos.
And when you breathe out, imagine that your out-breath is bright, light, and cool. This is maybe the antidote to whatever was needed to transform the conflict. So just letting
Cuando
your breath
exhales, permite
go.
y liviandad. Y quizá esta exhalación sea el antídoto para poder transformar este conflicto.
So let your breaths come and go just a few times, breathing in the heavy, hot, compressed conflict, breathing out the light, cool, spacious antidote, and seeing how each of them feels to you.
Y permanece respirando por algunos ciclos, inhalando lo denso, pesado, caliente del conflicto y exhalando la frescura, la liviandad, la leveza. Y ve cómo se siente ambas en ti.
And spend just a few last breaths just with the antidote. Let it sit peacefully around you. Just feel the cool spaciousness of this antidote around you.
Y tómate algunos momentos más con este antídoto, esta respiración de liviandad, belleza, frescura, que te rodee, que te envuelva.
And now to bring your awareness back into your body. If you're sitting here in this meeting, and do any stretching or rubbing of your eyes that you need to come back into the space with everybody else.
Y de poquitito anda volviendo este espacio, haz lo que necesites, ojos, quise moverte un poco.
Has Anahi dropped?
Aquí estoy, volví. Thank you, Eva, very much. Gracias, Eva. Y le damos la palabra a Nuno en este espacio construido. Y la traducción de Nuno la vamos a hacer al español en el chat, ¿ok? Es un desafío, estamos experimentando, pero para poder sostener el timing, vamos a hacerla así. So the translation for Nuno in Spanish is going to be on the chat. You're very welcome, Nuno, to share the presentation of these learnings of the summit.
Thank you, Anai. Hello, everybody. I'm really, really happy to be here with you and explore this theme. So I feel a bit humbled and daunted by the challenge of telling you a story about a summit who took more than a year and a half from the moment we started talking about working with conflict transformation to its making, and more than 6 months of interviews and 3,000 people involved over a 5 weeks journey, more than 100 live sessions. It's immense. So bear with me, and I hope to give you some hints of a bit of the richness that took place there. And I would like to start by showing you just very briefly the website. I don't know if you've been there already, but it's worth visiting. And the website is alive, and it still have all the materials there, so people can register and access everything. And the summit was organized over a 5 weeks period and 5 stages. And basically, we wanted to start with the 3 main movements of the summit was to touch on the problematic ways in which we understand conflict these days that prevent us from bringing new possibilities into the scene, and really looking for what are these ways that we are looking that get us stuck in reproducing responses that nobody wants or that bring very few advantages and benefits to people involved. Then the second movement was, okay, if the ways we are seeing are not serving us, then what other ways are there, both ancient ones that indigenous communities have been able to maintain, and also new insights coming from different fields of science, like evolutionary biology, systems thinking, etc. And we then moved to, okay, now that we start to have different perspectives that can start to help us open space for new possibilities, what practices are there that can help us sustain this kind of work? And we've done interviews to many, many people. You can see some of them here to talk about these things over these different stages. Okay, so this is all there. And if you go to Journey, you have the different stages, and when you click on them, you can get access to them if you register, because when you register, you get a password to access these materials. And it's for free. Obviously, we worked on this on an economy of gifts. Now I want to start telling you a bit of the story, and let me see. So view full screen. Is everybody listening to me good? Just, and I tell me if you with the microphone, because I can't see anyone. I just see the presentation. Can you hear me well? Okay, and you see the image well?
Sí.
Yeah. Fantastic. So, you know, we started with the summit with opening ceremony and the first week of grounding. We understood while we were preparing the summit that was really important to create a container. So this is the generative scribing that was made over the first open ceremony. And I want to bring the attention to this. When we work with these topics and we want to, when you want to create spaces where it's safe and healthy, and that we want to be safe and healthy to deal with these difficult issues, it's really important to look at how we create that container, the kind of qualities we want to bring in, and, you know, do rituals and ceremonies that help to sustain the kind of quality of interactions that we want to bring into the space. And that's what we've done with opening ceremony in the first week, because we wanted to create a very challenging, we wanted to tackle a challenging topic. And we started, as I told you, the second week, we started to really fall apart, which means to really touch on the wounds, on where are the problematic ways. And obviously, some of the themes that came out in that week were that our current paradigm is based on separation and scarcity, and what that has brought to us as in this current civilization, and how much wounds and traumas we carry because of this, you know, this way of being. Because basically the current system is all premises of extracting the vital force of people and the planet and all the living creatures in the planet. So it's not a sustainable system, and it's a system that provokes more and more trauma and conflicts because it's based on extracting vital energy. Now, when we started to tackle the perspectives, different perspectives that would help us to change our gaze at this, one of the interesting things is to start having an understanding of deep time. Elizabeth Satori, an evolutionary biologist, told us about the story of life on the planet and how the first bacteria that start to come into the planet, the first living beings in the planet, they spread all over the planet, consumed all the sugars, the resources they had available. They started to compete for those resources, and then they almost got extinct, and they realized that if they start to collaborate, they could be better, and they start to organize, and that's where the first unicellular organisms came into being, because the cell carries those first little living creatures that existed, like mitochondria and some others. They still live in our nucleus of our cells and of the cells of all living creatures in the planet today. So they organized in these unicellular beings, and then they spend another 2 billion years, you know, spreading all over the place, competing with each other, and then they almost got extinct, and then they realized they could organize in little cooperatives, and they transformed into multicellular organisms, of which we are one of them. So I guess that also was a message that we are in that phase of humanity where we are being invited to shift from a competitive adolescent period towards a mature adult collaborative state. And that's a very important story. Now, all the summit, big topic was coming around communion and around community. We live in such a complex times and with such interrelated problems, and we are also interdependent and interdependent, that we cannot move forward if we don't do it together, if we don't do it in relationship. And so that's a big part of this work, to learn to be in community, to reclaim community, not only with human beings, but with other living creatures, in our ecosystems, in our territories. And obviously that brings another thing, is we are all in transit between this old paradigm that is kind of coming to its end, and the new ways of relating and being in the world that can be more affirmative and nourishing to life. And so we are in this transition moment, so we carry the wounds and the issues and the ways of seeing from this old paradigm with us. It's not like we get rid of them and we can now create the new and we're going to be in a safe place. Actually, that's a problem with many of the change initiatives around the world. People tend to go to those spaces looking for, the embodiment of the new ways of the new world. And obviously we fail because we are humans and we're still learning how to bring the new and to embody it. So we need to be able to accommodate those failures and those difficulties or incapacities and to build capacity together. And this involves that we start to have a developmental perspective, meaning that human beings, all living creatures, are always have a living process that involves it's developmental. It's always changing, transforming. It reaches a peak, then it decay, and eventually dies. And obviously, when we were talking about this in the summit, was in the sense that we are living in a moment where it's really important that we work on ourselves, on our own ongoing development, to build new capacities in us, to help others in our community, in the people we work with, to also raise their capacity so that together we can really have capacity to bring the kind of change you want to bring into life, and then to influence and change the systems we are part of. So that development perspective is really important so that we don't get stuck in one way of seeing, one way of being, and one way of thinking that then separates us from each other. Now, there's a big blind spot of our times, and Otto Scharmer, among others, talks about this, is that when we talk about people with good qualities that we kind of refer to as models for us, let's say Gandhi, or people in our days that we look as leaders, people that we want to kind of follow in the sense of being that in that kind of way. We only see the physical manifestations of that person, so the way he behaves and acts in the world. But we fail to understand and to know the inner conditions that allow that person to be in that way, to show up in that way. So that's really a crucial thing, because that brings us to this sense that there's an inner world in us and the inner world within our cultures that shapes the way we show up. And if we don't consider that inner world in the way we work together and in the way we are even with ourselves, then we are missing an important aspect of ourselves and of each other that shapes dramatically the way we show up in any moment in the world. And so we are being called to really work on this inner aspect and don't get stuck in dynamics of separation of inner and outer. They are both aspects of the same thing. Yes?
I just wanted to give you the 5-minute warning.
Okay, thank you, Don.
I don't know if you've been intending to show other slides, but we're still seeing your title slide.
You're still seeing the first slide?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, there was many others that I was trying to show.
Now we're seeing them.
Okay, great. So this was the first, this was then, and now we are in blind spots. And now, when we start looking at the blind spots, then we also realize that we all carry traumas, individual and collective traumas. And a big part of the work with dealing with conflicts is being able to recognize better and to work with the traumas that we carry. Because we have, this separation, this scarcity-based society that we've grown up with left a lot of scars in us and in our cultures. And so we need to really work with this. And I'll give you some hints on how to work with this in different ways. Another topic that came very strongly was decolonization, the understanding that this way of being in the world that spread all over the world, but started in Europe and then went to the Western world on a global scale, has been quite devastating for cultures, for ecosystems. And so we need to be aware that even though we might be thinking that we are free of those scars and free of ways of seeing that come from a colonial or empire perspective, we still carry many of those ways of seeing and being with us. And we need to be doing a very important work to decolonize our ways of thinking. And also there was many other themes that we touched upon, post-activism. So the activism, like we have seen, is not working for us. What other ways of doing activism could be there for us to tap into? Mystical anarchism, ecofeminism, gift cultures, liberating learning, buen vivir, restorative justice, living systems view. We talked about money, like seeds and a cryptocurrency for regeneration. So it was a really wide variety of topics that interact with the way we understand conflict, because we were looking at conflict from a very wide perspective, understanding it on a personal level, interpersonal, but also on a structural level, that we have structures in place that kind of contribute to ongoing conflicts performing in our lives. Now, the fourth stage was looking at practices and seeding the future. And this is a list of some of the practices that took place, that were explored in the summit. I'm not going to be able to explain each one of them, not even all of them, but I'll list here, and you'll receive the presentation later on to get a sense of the different practices that are available. But I want to talk a bit about some of the common patterns that we watched in them. One is that all of them, most of them, if not all, are working on awareness-based practice methodologies or methods, meaning that we are being called to improve, to enlarge our capacity to be aware of ourselves and of the world around us, and that we are also being called to have this work with systems we are interacting with on an awareness-based level. So meaning how we can engage in conversations where different elements of the system coming together and expressing the voices from their places can help the system see itself better. Another is embodied somatic work was part of most of them. So looking at the body as a source of knowing, as a place that gathers memory and a place where we can work with. For instance, if we look at trauma resides in the body. So most of the trauma can be healed through body work, more than thinking about it or doing a lot of deep reflections. And obviously it's holistic, looking at persons. Most of the practice were looking at persons as a whole, looking at whole systems, and integral in the sense that they try to integrate and not to exclude. So looking at emotions, looking at the role of negative emotions also in our lives, understanding that we have this kind of 4 basic emotions: happiness, sadness, fear, and anger. And the other emotions are a combination of those, but they give us information about where we are at and how the world is. So it's really important that we, instead of putting them aside, that we look at them and listen to them. Obviously, this brings us to different ways of knowing, not only analytical, but also intuitive knowing with the body, knowing with other senses. So really extending our ways of knowing in the world, and not thinking that there's only one way to know. Deep listening, generative dialogue, and now I want to sort of talk about these visible and invisible aspects, because this is part of that story of the blind spots. And I want to say that not only it's invisible to us how each one of us feels the world, what's kind of the inner life, the inner world of each one of us, except when we are able to express them to each other and to really tap into that. We also have that on a cultural level, that there's the habits and the ways of doing that come from a long lineage. Let's think about it. We are on the tip of the human arrow towards the future, and we are the most recent of that story of evolution of humankind, and we carry with us that memory, and our cultures carry with us the memory of our ancestors, and that memories also have the shadow side, and that shapes how we show up. So it's really important that we start to look at that and take care of in a way that healing can take place and culture can transform. And that finally, just to finish, That involves also that many of these practices work with memory, time, and metamorphosis, understanding that nothing is permanent. And so the past is also not permanent. The past is not fixed in the history books. The past is still being reconfigured when we revisit. And just do the exercise of looking at your lives, thinking about past moments that changed your life dramatically, and trying to engage in a conversation with how you were in that time, so of yourself in that moment, and see how that can open up new ways for you and reconfigure your memories. So time and memory is also an important work in this. And this is the final generative scribing of the closing session. We had the final week just to kind of close properly and allow people space to think about what's going next for us as we close this journey. And I had many more things to say, but I hope this helps to kind of provoke some conversations. Thank you so much. Obrigado. Gracias. Merci.
Well, thank you very much, Nuno and Eva, for getting us started here and sharing about your wonderful Conflict Transformation Summit. Now it's everybody's turn to get involved in this conversation. In just a few moments, we're going to go into breakout groups of 3 or 4. And you'll have about 15 minutes or so in those breakouts to discuss a few different questions. Do you want to translate this part? Yep. Okay.
Yes, Don, thank you. Muchas gracias, Nuno, Eva. Sabemos que hay mucho más que se puede compartir, sin embargo, queremos escuchar las voces de todos, así que nos vamos a ir a salas compartidas. Si necesitas que tu idioma sea español, por favor, ponlo antes de tu nombre para que Lisa, que nos está ayudando a crear las salas, sepa que te vas a una sala ahí. Y la idea es que en el documento compartido, Silva, si puedes compartir el documento en el chat, todos cosechemos. So the idea is that in the document that Silva is going to share in the chat, we all put all the harvest of the conversation, and then we bring it back here. Don, you want to share the questions? Mm-hmm.
Yep. So the questions are already in the chat. So hopefully everybody can access those even after you go to your breakout groups. The questions are what is most alive for you now after hearing Nuna and Eva? How can a trainer or training help groups, support groups to move through conflict? And how can we shift towards an overall culture that embraces tensions and uses them as energy for co-creation? So you can talk about that all together. And please do pick 1 or 2 people from your group when you first get in there to take notes on the document and to come back and share some of the key insights with the whole group.
Super. Entonces nos vemos en un ratito. After this, we will have a break of 5 minutes for you to know. Vamos a tener después un break de 5 minutos y que disfruten sus conversaciones, que haya alguien ojalá que pueda tomar notas y traiga la cosecha al grupo después. So we are, Lisa, we can jump in. Super.
Good. So in about 15, 20 minutes.
Las preguntas están en el chat en español y portugués, ¿ya? Así que ahí las pueden ver.
Could you just add the link to the Google Docs again?
Yes, I will send it now. Control copy. There you have the document for the harvest, Lisa.
Lisa, how many people are in each group?
I think 3 to 4.
Yeah, there are about 3 to 4, 5. Yeah.
Okay, I was
Okay.
thinking, I was invited, shall I go? Because at the same time, it's like people will get questions. They might want to question more than converse with each other.
Mhm.
So I was wondering if I should go or not. I would like to go, but at the same time, yeah, I feel that that might happen.
I think it's nice that you go. It's nice that you
Okay.
contribute also.
Yeah.
And just, position yourself with different hat. Yeah.
Gracias, Nuno. Y ahí vemos Víctor en español. Víctor in Spanish, if it's possible. I understand Maricel also in Spanish.
Yes.
If
I
possible.
made the
Gracias,
point.
Silva. Gracias. Yeah. Good for now. I believe I was not aware of things because I was typing crazinessly. ¿Cómo se vio eso, Silva? ¿Se entendía la traducción? Translation was okay. Yes. I believe it's better in the document because maybe on the chat it's always coming up like toot, toot. This can bother people or not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's just a thing of time to be able to like have what you're gonna say and then translate it in a doc. Ah, you say it the same time in a doc.
We do it like this in the Joanna Macy course. We have the person speaking in English, and in a document on the side, they are typing in English just to understand every word she's saying. Is willing to ask a question, you can just express it in the Zoom chat with an H, or just put your hand up with the sign. Roberto, welcome.
Pues, y bueno, hablo en español. Tengo una pregunta para Nuno, porque pues toca un tema que me interesa mucho, que es lo de la descolonización. Y pues de mi experiencia es que yo bueno, soy originario de la isla de Cerdeña y de hecho pues es una comunidad, decimos, originaria, ¿no? Si queremos, de Europa. Y he vivido en mi piel lo que es, por ejemplo, una colonización de una cultura más fuerte sobre una más débil. Ahorita me encuentro en México, en Latinoamérica, y reconozco lo mismo, o sea, aquí en Latinoamérica que viene lo mismo. Entonces, como un patrón que se repite en mi vida y pues, entonces, ¿qué herramientas tenemos para descolonizarnos? Esta es mi pregunta.
¿Puedes hacer la pregunta en inglés, Roberto, o te traduzco yo? Resumidamente.
Mejor si traduces.
Yo te traduzco. So Roberto is from Italy, from the Sardinia island, and he said he has lived in his skin the colonization, and now he's in Mexico, experiencing the same pattern again. So he's asking which tools can you help me with this, Nuno? Which tools? ¿Qué herramientas decías?
Which tools are there for us to work with decolonizing ourselves and our cultures? Yeah.
Super.
Shall we receive more questions or go one by one?
Let's go with this one. And
Okay.
meanwhile, if you have a question, put an H on the chat.
That's a very challenging question, Roberto. I think there's kind of really three very basic human capacities that are at the heart of this. One is curiosity, to have really curiosity, to open our minds to other ways of seeing, other perspectives, and not hold on to our own views or our cultural views, what we call ethnocentrism, that then get us closed in our own little bubbles, like if there's no other world beyond our limits, our borders, our fences. And then another is courage, courage to really look at ourselves and our cultures in fully, and not with an idealistic version of them. Like I've learned that the Portuguese were the big discoverers of the world going around, and people still look at that past as if once we were great. And that doesn't allow to see the shadow aspect of that, and to really work with it in a way that we can meet it from a different place and recognize how much it still lives in us. So curiosity, courage, and then empathy. Understand that all living beings want the same thing, but we experience it in different ways, and to be really interested in how what's going on with the other, like that the other is not that as much other as we think. I would say those are the three main things. I think Eva wants to add, because Eva wants to add something about it.
Eva, yeah.
Yeah, just on a practical note, there's a very good article. In fact, I'm sure there are lots of good articles, but this one I came across called White Supremacy Culture by Tama Okun, which looks at the kind of takes features of organizational culture, like urgency, and looks at the way that they show up in the things that we take for granted, which is often how this colonialization really works inside of us, is in a really unconscious way. But she kind of opens that up and looks at both what happens and also how we can start to address it. I took real inspiration from that, and I'm actually working on a kind of what I'm calling a deep decolonization guide or resource, which is trying to expand on that, because she's just looking at the organizational culture, and I think there's so many more parts of life where that colonization shows up, and I think it's something that we need to do together, and really sort of dedicate ourselves to this, because it's long term.
It's quite subtle, right, Eva? It's quite subtle in many ways. It's quite subtle, permeating all our cultures.
Yeah, and I think you kind of peel away layers. So you learn about one bit and then think you've got it, and then there's another bit underneath.
Thank you very much. And I understand that we being here together, we're regenerating this. Working with you, Eva, with you, Nuno, and with Don, for me, is healing these wounds of colonization. So I see, Don, you're playing, and you have put an age. So you would like to ask a question, please?
Okay. Yeah, the main process that we teach here in the US for resolving conflict, transforming conflict, is nonviolent communication. But not everybody likes nonviolent communication. I'm wondering if there's alternatives to nonviolent communication that came up in terms of like actually how you structure the process of reconciliation.
I'm not going to be able to name all of them, but there was a few of them. For instance, prosocial, which brings a tool from behavioral psychology called the acceptance and the commitment therapy or training matrix. It's a very useful tool to work with groups on how to collaborate better and to have this kind of the invisible, shadowy aspects of each individual start to become visible, that people openly start to talk, and then create a space where really you can collaborate on a different scale. And they work on this on different scales. So if you go on the internet and write prosocial world, Paul Atkins, you'll find that. But there was dynamic facilitation. There was all sorts of things about, how to hold space where we can have an honest, open conversation about things that are meaningful to us in a way that doesn't end up in polarization. So a lot of work was around also, how to deal with polarization. And one of the things I think it's permeating many of these practices is something that a guy from esotericism called, I forgot his name, Gurdjieff, called the law of three forces, which is, in every phenomena that we live in life, there's an activating force and there's a restraining force. And if we get stuck in just one of those, we are fighting. but there's always a chance to reconcile those forces and to bring the system to a new level of order of complexity, which in persons means that we need to look at these tensions as opportunities to, see something more that was not there before. The tension is an opportunity for us to really be creative. And you see that with limits with kids, or limits of, permaculture limits of lakes, or the limit zones are the areas of more energy, more diversity. So tensions and conflicts between people and in groups are actually a call for us to see what's getting us stuck and bring something new, some new possibility, some new potential in.
Thank you, Nuno. Thank you for the friends that are copying in the chat all the resources. And we would love to stay for long with the questions, but we have time for one more. Clayton, you wanted to ask, and then we're moving to a group discussion altogether. So your question, Clayton, is?
Well, it was actually a response to what Don had asked when Don was talking about in the United States using nonviolent communication as a conflict transformation tool. One of the things that came up in the group, in the breakout group that we were just part of, was also the idea of deep listening. And what I asked the person who brought the idea up, deep listening, what does deep listening mean to you? Because everyone has, I think, a definition of deep listening, and also a toolkit for how to do it. But the comment that I wanted to make was, I believe that nonviolent communication is an effective tool, but I think there's something that comes before the nonviolent communication, which is establishing trust. Before you go to a person and say, well, I'm upset and my needs are this, I think there's a step that you have to take first, which is, how do you establish trust so that when you say to the person what you need from them, they don't feel defensive or upset, So I think that's the piece where nonviolent communication needs some extra help. And so I've been really curious about this deep listening space. How do we create this deep listening space where that trust is built? What are the tools for that? What does it mean? And then you can come to the person once you have that trust in place, or that person really feels that they are safe with you. And then you can say what it is that you're upset about or what needs aren't being met. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Clayton. And we naturally are moving to the group discussion. So welcome all the voices to feed this deep listening, creating the safe space to be able to express difficult things, give feedback needed. What else? I saw you in the chat. What other voice wants to be heard today in our collective system? If you just can open your mic and jump in, you're welcome to share. I see the resonance, Clayton, in your words in the chat. What had worked for you? What has not worked for you?
I'll just suggest a possible topic for conversation, which is, I think, a big challenge that we see here in the US sometimes is when somebody joins the core group of a transition initiative and there's some kind of, emotional or psychological trauma issues, and being very disruptive to the group, that sometimes that ends up crashing the whole group. And just wondering what people's experience is, working with, some of those challenging aspects, how you might have done that, either in transition or in any other groups that you've been part of.
Don, I would like to take that because that prompted me, so you can actually perhaps tell us later if it has nothing to do, but I've been together with conflict transformation the last couple of years have been for me about realizing and acknowledging trauma, both in our political tissue and our social tissue, and much inspiration for this has come from Eva. So I would like to take your question, and if it's not answered, then please go and say, like, Eva, what is for you this conflict between conflict transformation, trauma, and what does it require us to do? I'm sorry, Don, if I took your question, your subject there. Okay.
Just trying to get the ball rolling, and I do want to note that Tom and Gesa are. Oh, you're Tom. So Gesa's also on Stack. So I don't know if you want to.
Maybe I just respond to your question, Don, and then we can go ahead with Tom's question. So I think I've seen transition initiatives really nearly dying because of people who entered the initiatives and had serious problems. And I think it's very important to look if the transition initiative is the circle able to heal trauma. And if there's an initiative, maybe only meeting 1 or 2 times a month, and the entire meetings are full of problems with personal traumas. So I guess that the initiative itself is not able and the right place to solve this. And I think we must somehow really look at it, and at a certain point also decide if there's another circle needed. And I think transition initiatives cannot heal everything. So they just start to reorganize at a local level, and they can't heal the entire traumas of lots of people. So I really think we need to deal with the question what a transition initiative can really support and bear, yeah, and where we have to look for other places. And the problem is that there are not lots of places where we can heal trauma. So there's a lack of places and circles to deal with this problem, and transition initiatives alone can't do it.
Bill is next on our stack.
I appreciate what you were just saying, Kisa, and I think one of our challenges is how do we set limits when we're supposed to be a community group? Where are the boundaries that get created? I've been a part of many groups where there have been people with trauma or psychological problems from other places that have disrupted a group, and I think that that's one of our challenges, is how to be compassionate and hold boundaries. And that's a trick. It's not easy, because who's to know which way is which. But the second thing is, we live in traumatizing societies in many different parts of the world. So it's not like there's trauma and then there's not trauma. So we're going to have to continue to figure out how to hold space for the healing. And there's going to be, it's not like it's a binary thing. Either there's a traumatic set of experiences for somebody, or they're totally, integrated and healed. There are going to be people who we just have to say, this is not a space for you. And I know that's tricky with like I said, so. Check.
Great, thank you. let's go to Eva next, and then Tom, if you want to jump back in, and then Nuno.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I think it's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, the thing that I feel like trauma is a really key piece, because it underlies so much of our experience, and yet we never talk about it. And all of us have got personal trauma from growing up, and also from growing up in this kind of culture. And very often it's not processed or even conscious. We don't even know that it's there. And it can often be that that's what's underneath a conflict that happens in a group. Is, you know, my trauma and your trauma intersecting and not being able to cope with one another, and we don't have the tools or the space to uncover it, and do the kind of healing work that needs to happen in order for us to come to a resolution. And I think that so I do feel that one of the most important elements of the change that we need to be doing, along with our community orchards and our community wind farms and our bike schemes, is to start to be able to challenge that silence that we have around trauma. And it's, you know, that's not an easy task, and it needs to be done gently and safely. But I feel that it's one of the biggest things that we can do to start to dismantle this culture of domination, which is basically the reason that we're in this situation of having to have transition groups in the first place. Because not that they're not fun, but it would be great if we could just be living our lives and not having to do a whole bunch of voluntary work on top of them. And so, yeah, I feel that it's really radical. It's really revolutionary to talk about, to find ways that are safe to talk about the pain that's inside and the history, to acknowledge that and be vulnerable around that, and to make space to listen to others. And there will be people who are just so deep in their trauma and upset that a group that basically is about community orchards and whatever else is not able to handle them. And I think it is important to be clear when that's the case. But I feel like we could move quite a long way towards people who are just letting it hang out because they've got to that point. And it's not easy work, but I feel it's incredibly important. That's all.
Yeah, and may become increasingly important as the great unraveling continues. Tom, did you have something else you wanted to say?
Good. Okay. Thank you, Eva. Thanks, Don.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanna. It's my turn, Don. Yeah, I just wanna reinforce what Eva said and kind of bring it from a different place. I think we have one of the issues that I think that's quite permeable or alive within the transition movement, but also in many places and groups seeking change, is a singular idea about how change takes place. And it's an idea that change takes place only when you do something. You have to act in the world, bring energy, intervene in order for the world to change. And I want to say that I think that is a narrative that is part of the paradigm that led us to where we are now. Because we still seek to control, to make linear plans that as long as we do this and that, we'll arrive there. And I've often seen in groups people being excluded because they want to just ask for, can we just stop doing and have a conversation, a serious conversation about things that are important to me, important to us, that are not working or this. And there's a resistance to do this. And I think that resistance is part of the problem, because we resist to deal with the wounds and the traumas that Eva talked about. We resist to deal with issues that are at the heart of the problems we are facing, because we just want to keep going, keep doing. And that is leading to a lot of burnout. When we talk with some of the interviews we made, like for instance, John Young, he told us when he go to Africa, because he does this work with the people from the Kalahari Desert around trekking, he arrives there with a group of people, and the first 4 days of a 5.5 days meeting, or the first part of the first days of the meeting is just greeting each other and spending time with each other, no conversation about work whatsoever. And then they get to a place when they're going for the work, it just flows, because they've built already the conditions for the work to flow in a different way. I heard another story about a guy, that one of the founders of Greenpeace, that was in Canada, I think in Vancouver, trying to stop the work of the port of Vancouver, who receives a lot of oil boats, big boats bringing oil in and taking oil out. And he contacted the indigenous leaders of the communities around the place, because he felt they were the best allies. And what the guys told him was, okay, we do this work with you, but we have two conditions. One is we lead the process. We're not instruments. We are the ones taking the lead. And the second is you need to spend with us some months doing sweat lodges and work with us before we go out and do some work together. And obviously you had all these, climate activists like, what are you doing? I want to go and fight and scream and all this. But they went through the process, and what they say is that after 1 year doing sweat lodges together, there was nothing that could stop this group from doing the work they had to do, because they were so strong on the inside that they could do anything together. And I think we need to consider, when we do boundaries, I hear you guys about problematic people that disturb, and maybe there's a good way to kind of help them find their way, but excluding not only people, but these voices, this work that needs to be done from within, not only people, individuals, but as groups, because most of this is not only individual, it's a collective problem, a collective responsibility. Then we need to hear those voices. Otherwise, we're just reproducing the mechanisms of the machine.
Thank you, Nuno. We're kind of coming close to the time we need to start wrapping up. I saw Anahi is on stack.
Yeah, I would like to share also, I resonate very much with the personal work to be able to hold the tensions. And one thing I have seen very much in myself and in others is like this physical, emotional, and psychological automatic pattern of running away of uncomfortable situations. That is like a physical reaction. Every time I feel pain, I take the hand. Every time my emotions bad are felt, I contract myself and go back. It's something natural, biological in our whole system. So the conscious work you were mentioning, for me is clave, is a key, because it's my consciousness, the one that makes me stay though my body, emotions, and this for me is a key.
Anahi,
Because
disculpa. Sorry, Anahi. Just repeat the last two sentences. We lost you. Just the last two sentences.
Wow, sorry for my internet today. Maybe we're too many screens. So my learning is that in this moment that my body, my emotions, and my mind want to run away from the conflict or tension, and my stay.
Yeah, we keep losing you. I think maybe if you just shut off your video, that will help.
Yeah, I don't want to take more time, but essentially it's the consciousness to stay in the uncomfortable. And to know that in this gap between reaction and election is the possible of change. If I don't run away and somehow I open my heart or stop judging and stop reacting, a possibility of something different can emerge. Mhm. So I think we're coming to the end of this open discussion, Don. I give you the voice, the stick. Mhm.
Yeah, so I think this is probably only the beginning of a larger discussion. And thank you to Nuno and Eva for kicking this off. Yeah, hopefully everybody at this point has received invitation to continue these conversations on Slack. If not, I think we will be sending you an invitation after this meeting, and we can continue the discussion there. We'll post the recording of this, post slides from the presentation that Nuno gave, and can continue talking about this really important topic of conflict transformation. I'd just like to invite everybody at this point to write a few words into the chat about how you're feeling at the end of this webinar, how you're feeling about this topic of conflict transformation. And we will actually take these words and turn them into a kind of word cloud, word art. And I don't know if that needs to be translated.
Te invitamos a poner 3 palabras en el chat de cómo te estás sintiendo después de este webinar. Entendemos que este es el comienzo. La invitación es a que continúen las conversaciones en el Slack. Y también expresar que estamos hoy día reunidos acá varios miembros del Círculo de Transición Interior y especialmente del Círculo de Transformación del Conflicto. Y esperamos tener más espacios como estos para continuar con la reflexión. Sharing also that I'm happy here with us are some of the members of the Inner Transition Circle, especially the Conflict Transformation Program that is being activated soon. And hopefully we will be offering more spaces to go deeper in these conversations and to develop these practices of being together, deep listening, how to communicate, hold tensions, and all what we are really needing in our transition ecosystem. Entonces, si ya pusiste tus palabras ahí, puedes continuar poniendo esas palabras para hacer una nube de palabras para cosecharlo. And also expressing that yesterday we have a new launch training that just started with Naresh. It's 8 weeks, I believe, of training, and we are happy to be the lineage of Naresh, Sophie, and all the ones that have come before us. So they are sharing with you in the Zoom chat the connection. If you want to jump in there in the launch online, this online possibility allows us to be in many places speaking in English. Entonces les estoy compartiendo un entrenamiento de lanzamiento de la transición que es en inglés. Puedes compartirlo con tus seres si es que ellos saben inglés. And also sharing you the next webinars. This is the second webinar. Next webinar is with Josue that is here with us. that is holding the governance role also in the Hubs Circle. And in the training circle, I have learned a lot working together all the past year. And so we have shared governance and healthy groups in the 18th of February. Entonces, el próximo webinario es de gobernanza compartida y grupos saludables, sostenido por Josué, que es del Hub de Bélgica, que es parte de los roles de gobernanza actuales en el círculo corazón de los Hubs. So that is, and thank you so much for coming, to have the courage to open the Pandora box and talk about tensions. Muchas gracias por venir, atreverte a tener el coraje de abrir la caja de Pandora y conversar de las tensiones. All the Hubs representatives to jump in Slack conversations or connect the training circle, connect the inner transition circle. We're collaborating all together to build what is the best for the movement. So please bring your voices and bring the voices of your community to be able. Entonces, pidiéndoles a todas las personas que están aquí a los representantes de los Hubs que participen en el Hubs de los Slack, en el Slack de los Hubs, para que todos juntos podamos construir la mejor manera de poder servir el movimiento, ¿ya? Y de llegar a las bases. I don't know, Don, if it is something, few voices.
No, just
Silva, if you, Mónica.
I just want to say thanks to everybody for being here. I think you know, this process of re-energizing transition training at the international level is really exciting to me. I hope it's exciting to you. I think there's tremendous amounts of possibilities for innovation and sharing with each other. So please do stay connected.
Thank you very much. So you can open your mics and just celebrate. We're staying together.
Thank you for it.
In this
Amazing work.
Obrigado.
Everyone.
Obrigado.
Dankeschön.
Thank you.
Tschüss.
Nuno,
Muchas
adorei,
gracias.
Nuno.
Foi ótimo.
Bye, Eva, miss you.
Excelente.
Viri.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias.
Alegria.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. À la prochaine.